Hello everyone, and welcome back to a brand new video from me, Pickles Park Reviews, and welcome to a predictions video for the 2021-22 Premier League season. Now it's the eve of the Premier League season at time of recording. Thursday night, tomorrow, Brentford face Arsenal in the first game of the Premier League season, and it's only right that I predict the Premier League just like I did last year. And yeah, I predicted the Premier League last year. I do this every single year. Me and my dad both do it, and then we both bring up our lineups at the end of the season and see who got more points and who got more predictions correct. However, last year was the first time I decided to make that into a video, and yeah, now my failure at predictions is visible for all to see. We only got 2 correct places, which was Tottenham in 7th and Fulham in 18th. I think those were the only 2. I got a few in a similar position, a number of ones which was 1 or 2 places off. I also had some howlers. West Ham, bottom of the table, and Aston Villa in 19th were horrendous predictions, considering that West Ham literally got 6th in the table and got Europe, which is the absolute opposite of what I thought they'd do. They had an amazing season in contrast to what I thought would be their worst season in years. So yeah, I had some absolute howlers, including Arsenal in 5th, that was pretty terrible. Wolves in 6th as well, they ended up finishing 13th. Southampton in 10th as well. All pretty terrible predictions, although ultimately I stand by everything I said in that video. At the time of making those predictions a year ago, I think my predictions were pretty good. West Ham was a pretty negative place, and they hadn't made many signings. Villa had only just survived relegation, and then obviously a year on, you know, these teams had contrasting seasons to what I thought, but ultimately I still stand by, at the time, those were good predictions. Just at the end of the season, they just looked rather laughable. And that's the issue with predictions, because the mood at a club at the start of the season can very quickly change due to, you know, great performances, some key signings on deadline day or towards the end of the window, which obviously they haven't made at the start of the season. Different managerial changes. Maybe a manager goes after 4 games and the new manager comes in with a different style of play, which can make a club's form good or can decrease the chances of a club doing well. So ultimately, you know, clubs' fortunes can change. What may seem like really solid predictions at the start of the season can look very foolish if the club then ends up going on a different trajectory. So ultimately, these predictions are probably all going to seem pretty terrible in a year's time, because football isn't played on paper. So ultimately, you know, what should be a great title race on paper may not be, because we've had great title races on paper the last few seasons, yet we haven't had a single good title race since 2019. So ultimately, yeah, these things are very hard to call, and what seems like it's obvious on paper probably won't happen in truth. But yeah, let's get on to my predictions, and starting in 20th, I've gone with Watford. Now, I'm really hoping for a better showing from the promoted teams, because I thought the promoted teams were pretty damn poor last year. Obviously, Leeds had a very good season, finishing in 9th, but West Brom and Fulham finishing in 18th and 19th place respectively. Well, not respectively, they were awful. Fulham had their bright moments, but in the end just weren't good enough, even though I thought they had their moments. West Brom were terrible. I predicted West Brom to have a decent season last year, because I thought they had a good young squad, and they played attacking football under Bilic. A few games, Bilic is gone, they bring in Big Sam playing terrible football, and yeah, they were dreadful. And it just made it very boring, because these promoted teams, you want to see good stuff from the promoted teams, and ultimately both Fulham and West Brom were awful. So I'd really like the promoted teams this year to really put much more of a fight and really acclimatise more to the league. rather than coming into it some of the worst teams and staying as some of the worst teams and getting relegated. That being said, in 20th place I have gone for one of the newly promoted teams. I've gone for Watford, and I could quite easily see Watford, you know, maybe getting 15th in the league. I think these things are quite hard to judge, and I think these relegated teams were actually harder than last year's. They were less obvious than last year's, which is odd considering I put West Ham and Aston Villa in the bottom three last year, which seemed like terrible choices, but at the time they were pretty obvious to me. They seemed pretty obvious. This time it was a lot harder to get my bottom three. I was umming and ahhing with certain teams. Watford at one point I was thinking I'd put somewhere along 15th, but ultimately I think you look at their squad. They had the best defence in the Championship last year. That cannot go underestimated. They could very much have a good defence this year, but ultimately I think the Premier League's harder, and I just think they've got a very bloated squad. They've got like 9 strikers on their books. You know, that's ridiculous. They've got some good strikers. Deeney is obviously a proven Premier League decent scorer. Yao Pedro looks like a very exciting young prospect. Cuco Hernandez looks pretty good. Obviously, they signed Josh King, Ashley Fletcher. They've also got Andre Gray on their books for some reason. They've just got far too many strikers. Stipe Perica is another one. Far too many strikers on their books, and ultimately that's going to be pretty bad for morale. And it just looks like, to me, a team that has no idea what their first choice team is, because it looks like they have no idea what even their first choice strike partnership is. If they play one striker, that's even worse, which I'm pretty sure they do. They've got some good players: Will Hughes, Ismail Assar. A lot of those strikers are decent, but I don't know if they'll be able to deliver in this Watford team. And as I said, they've got a pretty decent defence, but ultimately I just think they've got a very bloated squad. And yeah, Xisco Munoz, he was pretty decent in the Championship, but you'd be lying if you thought he genuinely will survive the rest of the season in charge of Watford. He's going to be sacked within the first 3 months in charge, and that could not happen. He could be like Javi Gracia, who somehow manages, you know, a full season at Watford, but ultimately I don't think that's going to be possible for Xisco. I think he's going to be sacked, and I think they're going to bring in another foreign coach who ultimately doesn't quite hit the ground running, a bit like when a couple of seasons ago when they brought in Quique Sanchez-Flores. I don't know, I think this Watford team has the potential to survive, but I also think it's an incredibly bloated squad with a manager that ultimately I don't think will survive the season. So this team could do well, but ultimately I think it could also be pretty disastrous for Watford. So maybe unjustly, but ultimately I've put them in 20th place. But as I said, these bottom three were pretty hard to call. In number 19th, many people have been going for promoted teams for 2 out of their 3 spots in the bottom 3, if not all of them, which, I mean, when does that ever happen? When do 3 promoted teams all go down together? That very rarely happens. And many people, if I put Watford in 20th, would presume I'd put Norwich in 19th. I haven't. I've gone with Southampton. Now, I remember in my predictions video last year, I put Southampton 10th. I thought, these is a club that is really on the up. Hasenhüttl, great manager. They've got Danny Ings banging in the goals. They've got some great young players. Ward Prowse is very exciting. Good young players like Walker Peters, Mohamed Salazou. Brilliant players. And they started off the season well last year and then just went to poo. They went to shit, essentially. They were very bad, Southampton, in the second half of the season. Terribly so, to the point that they were first at one point, but ultimately, yeah, they ended up about 14th, I believe. They really weren't good, and they were on relegation form for the second half of last season. And yeah, whereas last season, they were going into that season off of the back of a really strong end to the 2019-20 season. They had a terrible end to the 2021 season. So yeah, they're going into this with the opposite atmospheres, Southampton. I think Hasenhüttl looked like a good manager, but now I think he's really underperformed. I think with this squad, he's really showing that perhaps he's good in spells, but he's not the man to truly take this Southampton team to the next level. Then you're looking at the squad. It's a very thin squad as it is. I know Hasenhüttl likes that. He likes a thin squad, so he knows where he stands with all his players. But ultimately, a few injuries, and ultimately I think this squad, it's very susceptible to falling down the league. They've put in some poor performances the back end of last season. I think that could continue. I wouldn't have put them going down, but I would have put them near the bottom of the table, but not going down. But they've lost Danny Ings. That's ridiculous, and not even to a big team. They've lost him to Villa, which at one point last season I would have said Southampton were better than Villa, or at least challenging Villa. This season, no, I think that's just shown that Ings wants to go to Villa rather than Southampton. Southampton's a sinking ship. Ings was so pivotal to Southampton, and he's just gone. Yannick Vestergaard as well, was very good at the Euros. Was a key man for Southampton. He's now looks like he's on his way to Leicester. So ultimately, that's 2 players gone. They've replaced Ings with Armstrong. Armstrong was very good in the Championship last year. But ultimately, that's a lot of pressure on a player who needs to acclimatise to the league. I said that about Watkins last year. Ultimately, he proved me wrong at Villa. And Armstrong could prove me wrong. But I think Southampton, the mood is going to be quite dour. And that's a lot of pressure on Adam Armstrong. A player who needs to acclimatise to the league. To essentially replace Danny Ings, who is one of the sole sources of goals for Southampton. They've still got some good players. They've still got James Ward-Prowse. But ultimately I think that it's going to be a pretty dire season for Southampton. I could really see this team capitulating. And Hasenhüttl, I don't think will survive the season. He's shown that he's a decent manager. He's also shown that he's not up points. I think this could be his undoing. And I think this might be the season where Southampton, the selling club, finally doesn't quite replace their players and finally goes down. In 18th place, it pains me to say I've got Norwich. Now, I really didn't want to predict Norwich to go down because I like a lot of their signings. I think that a lot of people are putting them 20th purely because of where they ended the 2019-20 season at rock bottom. And they're playing a similar brand of football, but they're gods at the Championship. I think they were stronger in the Championship this time around winning it than they were when they won the Championship in the 18-19 season. I think a lot of these players now have Premier League experience and they're coming up at better players. People like Max Aarons, Todd Cantwell, maybe even Timu Pukki, who I think is a bit of a risk having so many goals reliant on him when he couldn't deliver a couple of seasons ago in the Premier League. But I think they've also got better depth at striker. They've got Tzulis, who I think is a winger come striker from PAOK, is a very good prospect. They've also got Josh Sargent, the FIFA wonder kid. They've signed him from Werder Bremen. I remember on a FIFA 19 Peterborough Road to Glory, Josh Sargent was amazing for me, the American, because he had such a high potential on that FIFA. So he's a really good wonder kid. They've signed him from Werder Bremen. So they've got some squad depth along with Jordan Hugo there as well, Adam Ida as well. So if Peaky doesn't quite hit it, I think one of those other players will. They've obviously lost Buendia, that's a massive loss for them. But they've replaced him with Milot Rashica again from Werder Bremen. Which is a very good signing. I think Rashica in theory should be able to effortlessly replace Buendia. But then again, he's never played in the league before, and he wasn't great at Werder Bremen. He's a player with lots of potential and lots of ability, but he didn't show that much in a relegated Werder Bremen team last year. Same with Josh Sargent as well. So ultimately, these players have potential, but they're signing a lot of foreign players, which isn't a bad thing. I think often people say they're signing a lot of foreign players who have never played in the league, but then look at a lot of other clubs who sign a lot of established Championship or Premier League players who have played in England and also don't do very well. So I mean, it's a balance, but I think at Norwich they've signed a lot of players who haven't played in the league before, which could do well. I think Rashica could be a really good player for them. I think he also could not be, swings and roundabouts for Norwich. I think they could have a really good season. They could also not. It pained me putting them in 18th because I think they could do better. I also think they could do worse. So I think that they won't be down, far. They won't be a number of points adrift. I think they'll be battling out towards the end of the season with the team I've got above this. I don't think they'll be surefire relegated, but I think by the end of it, they will just not have enough, because I think they've got too many signings that could be good but could also not work out. There's not many signings here that are guaranteed to really hit the ground running in this league. Billy Gilmore is a decent signing. Again, he could be a wonderful signing for Norwich, but he also could not be. He also could be a bit similar to Renato Sanchez the year Swansea went down. So yeah, again, he's another signing who could be great, could ultimately not be. Pierre Lees Milou is a decent signing, but I think they made some okay signings. Time will tell. Norwich could do really good. They also could do worse than this, but ultimately I think they'll just go down in 18th. Newcastle are in 17th now. Part of me wanted to put Newcastle in the relegation zone above Norwich, but ultimately I can't justify it. I think Newcastle will just survive purely because of the quality of players they've got. Alan Maximin, they've got Callum Wilson as well. They're guaranteed goals there. They got Almiron. They're obviously signing Joe Willock again. He was great towards the end of last season. He essentially single-handedly kept them in the division last year. But yeah, I think it's very unlikely Joe Willock will replicate that form, because it'll be hard for any player to replicate the ridiculous amount of form he was showing at the back end of last year. And they just haven't signed anyone else. I have a feeling Steve Bruce will make a lot of signings on deadline day, shrewd, cheap signings. That's how he likes to play. But obviously, I can't take that into account because I can't see into the future. So I've got to judge this Newcastle team as I see them right now. And it's a very weak squad. It's miraculous how they even managed to stay in the division last year. They haven't improved it. Steve Bruce isn't a good enough manager at this stage. I always think since they appointed Steve Bruce, it's more of a case of when rather than if they'll get relegated. I thought this might be the year. On reflection, and maybe it won't be, I think they'll just survive, just survive. I think it'll be close between them and Norwich. I could also see them going down though. So yeah, not a great season for Newcastle, but just surviving, as they always do. In 16th, surprising for some people because they seem to predict this team to be doing quite well, I've gone for Brighton. And that's primarily because they haven't strengthened all that much. They've lost Ben White. He was a good centre-back for them. They haven't replaced him. There's talks of them signing Nat Phillips from Liverpool. I think that would be a good signing. Or if they don't replace Ben White, I mean, they were doing fine without him. I don't think that would be terrible. They need to replace him. I think primarily they do need to replace him. But if they don't, it's not the end of the world. Dan Burn is a more than capable centre-back to step in. Shane Duffy's okay too. I think primarily why I'm sticking Brighton in 16th is because they haven't signed a striker. They've barely signed anyone, but they haven't signed a striker. And people keep on going on about Brighton's expected goals. They've got some of the highest expected goals in the league, yet they have so many chances and they just can't finish. And that's why they play good football, but they just don't pick enough points up. And they haven't shown me anything in the transfer window to really prove me wrong. They haven't signed a striker, so why are they going to be so much better than they were last season? I think it's going to be similar to last season, flirting with the relegation zone. They don't really look like they're going to go down, but they're going to be down there regardless, because they just won't pick up enough points, because they just won't score enough goals. Neil Maupay has shown at this division that he's okay, but he's not good enough. He's not going to secure you the goals Brighton need. He's not going to put away those chances. And maybe they'll sign Odson Edouard or Darwin Nunez, but they haven't so far, and they haven't got a striker. They've barely improved the side. I think they probably will spend that Ben White money at some point, but they haven't at time of recording. I can only judge what I've got so far. I can only judge, what they're like right now. And ultimately, yeah, Brighton, similar to what they've done in the other seasons under Potter. 16th. 15th, Burnley. This really doesn't make much sense to me. I've said it countless times, I don't like Burnley. They're a really boring and negative team to watch, with a really boring squad, with a really boring manager. But ultimately, Sean Dyche, he does the business. Burnley, season in, season out, have one of the worst squads in the Premier League, and they always survive. It's ridiculous. Fair play to Sean Dyche. It's ridiculous how he manages to keep this squad motivated and keep this squad surviving, even though they're not that great. He has a set way of playing. I don't like it, but it gets them results. Fair play. I've seen a few people predicting Burnley to go down this year. I understand it. They've got a thin squad. The squad is aging. There's not a lot of quality in that squad, but there's never been a lot of quality in that squad. The squad has always been quite thin, and yet Sean Dyche has always pulled it out of the bag. I just think he'll probably do it again. They could go down, but I just don't see them getting relegated under Sean Dyche, at least maybe not for another season or so. Nathan Collins, potential-wise, is a decent signing. It's a very Burnley-esque signing, but they haven't really signed anyone but they never really do, and they're always fine. So I don't think you can take that into much consideration with Burnley. 15th. 14th, Crystal Palace. I think when Vieira was announced, I thought they were going to be relegated. Vieira, wonderful player, not so great a manager, and they had a ridiculous amount of key players being released going for free. I thought this is probably going to be the end for Crystal Palace. Then they signed Mark Guehi, obviously from Chelsea, a fantastic season and a half on loan at Swansea. They also signed Michael Elise, Joachim Anderson, Conor Gallagher. These are brilliant signings, and I think these are the type of signings that are really going to keep Crystal Palace in the division this year. They've obviously lost Eberechi Eze to injury. They still don't have a great striker, although Benteke obviously had a bit of a renaissance last season. It's, could Vieira transform this team? They've had years of stability and safety under Roy. It could be a risk getting this Palace team to play attacking football. With the players they've signed, the exciting and really quality signings Patrick Vieira has made, I think they'll be safe. I think they could struggle. It's always an ass getting a team that's played very, very negative football for the last few seasons to switch up their game and push on and really play attacking football. So I think that's probably why they won't push on any further than just about safety, because you've always got a, expect a transition period at these clubs. But they've made some quality signings, and really, without these signings, the narrative could have been very different at Crystal Palace. But they made some brilliant signings, and that's why I'm putting them, a reasonable position. It's safety, which I'm pretty sure every Crystal Palace fan would be happy with. 13th, I've gone for Brentford. It's very hard to predict promoted teams, and Brentford are the team that is the hardest to predict. I haven't seen much of Brentford, I'm going to be honest. The only two games I've watched of Brentford were the playoff final that they lost to Fulham and the playoff final in which they beat Swansea. So yeah, I don't watch a lot of Championship football, I'm not going to lie to you. And obviously I know more about Norwich and Watford because they were in the Premier League just a season ago. Brentford, they're an unknown entity. They haven't been in the top flight of the English Football League system since I believe 1950, something crazy like that. So it's going to be an exciting season for Brentford fans. Uncharted territory. I think they've got a pretty decent side. Lots of people think they might go down, but I think Brentford, unlike the other promoted teams, they've got an element of surprise. You look at other teams in this position, teams like Leeds, Sheffield United, teams that haven't really been in the Premier League, and they come in and they prove people wrong in the first season, and they really perform, show them what they're about. They're surprise people. I think Brentford could be similar. Ivan Toney, I think he will acclimatise to the league, purely because look at how he acclimatised from League One to the Championship in just a single season. That's ridiculous, being the Championship top scorer. I think he'll probably acclimatise just as well to the Premier League. I think he'll really be banging in the goals. I hope so, because he's in my fantasy team this year. They've got a really strong squad. People like Jota Silva, Brian Mbeumo, Marcus Forss, Sergi Canos, Rico Henry. They've made some decent signings as well. Christopher Ayer is a very good signing. They've also signed another winger, Visser, from Lorient, and Henry Onyekuru from Midtjylland. They've made some okay signings. I'm going to be honest, I know nothing about the players other than Ayer, who even then I don't know all too much about. But yeah, I think they've got a decent squad. It's not the strongest in the league, but I think they'll have that element of surprise to them this year. And I think they could hit second season syndrome, but I think they're going to be pretty comfortable this year. And I'm really excited to see how they perform in the league. 12th, I've gone with Wolves, Wolverhampton Wanderers. I think this will be a transition season for Wolves under new coach Bruno Lage. I was a big fan of Nuno. Unfortunately, it didn't go that well for Wolves last year due to a variety of different circumstances. A lot of injuries when they really hadn't had many injuries their first two seasons in the league. Last year, they had injuries, including a horrific injury to Raul Jimenez. Obviously, losing Jota as well right at the start of the season, which, when I predicted Wolves to foolishly finish 6th, Jota hadn't actually joined Liverpool at that point. Obviously, Jimenez hadn't been injured. It made sense for Wolves to push on, build on those back-to-back place finishes. Obviously, it was a season of lows for Wolves, even though 13th isn't all too bad. But, based on what they'd done before, it was a pretty underwhelming season. Nuno's gone now, and they haven't really signed anyone. I think Trincao is a very exciting signing, but other than that, they haven't really signed anyone, which, I don't know, maybe Bruno Lage thinks that ultimately the style of football he's playing, he doesn't need many players. And let's not forget, this Wolves side is a very talented Wolves side. You've still got, obviously, Jimenez, Pedro Neto, Adama Traore, Ruben Neves, Jean Martinho, Johnny Otto, Nelson Semedo, very good players. I think it's just going to be a bit of a transition period for Wolves. I think we've got a new coach coming in after many seasons of Nuno. They're going to need time to acclimatise. So maybe the season after next, if it all goes well under Laja, they could, be pushing on back to where they were in the 1920 and 18-19 seasons. But right now, I think just a season of transition, a solid season for Wolves. 11th place, West Ham, the team I predicted to finish bottom of the table last year, and West Ham proved me wrong. They got Europe. It was an incredible achievement. Moyes showed that he's not quite the washed up manager I thought he would be, and loads of members of this squad performed out of their skin last year. The reason why I'm putting them in 11th is because it's a hard ask to repeat those Europa League heroics. Getting into the Europa League last year is going to be a very hard ask to get that team to perform at that level again, so I'd expect a drop off anyway. It's only typical with these teams. But they've got Europa League football, amazing achievement, the fans are going to love it, and I think they could go on a good Europa League run. But West Ham have got a very thin squad, and having to divide that squad from Europa League and also into the Premier League games, the squad is going to be very thin on the ground, and I think they could really struggle. You've seen teams get into the Europa League, these smaller teams, they don't quite have the squad for it, they struggle in the Premier League, they don't do as well as they did the season before. I think that's the case with West Ham. Also, they haven't really signed anyone. Areola is a very good signing from, obviously, PSG, is very good on loan at Fulham last year. Single-handedly, brought them many points. He was excellent. And you could argue they don't even need him because they've got a very capable keeper in Fabianski, but he's going to be a real asset. He's the only player they've really signed, and I think they should have strengthened this team. They haven't really. They've obviously lost Jesse Lingard. That's a big blow for them. I think it'll be a decent season for West Ham. Very safe, mid-table mediocrity, very safe from relegation battle. But I think, having not really invested in the squad, the drop-off you typically get with these teams, and also, the tribulations you get with the Europa League, I think we'll just have them finishing mid-table. Nothing to shout about, but nothing terrible for West Ham. Breaking into the top 10 now, I've gone for Leeds, having them finish one lower than what they did last season. They managed 9th, and Leeds are an interesting one because I keep on thinking, are Leeds going to do worse than they did last season? Second season syndrome might affect them. I don't mean that they get relegated, I don't think they will. I don't think they'll go the way of Huddersfield, Sheffield United and going down second season. But I think, they lack that element of surprise. They could finish 13th, 14th, 12th position. But I just think you look at their team, Rafinha, he's only going to get better. Jack Harrison on the other wing. Patrick Bamford showed everyone he's actually a pretty decent striker. And, Bamford isn't performing. You've got Rodrigo there as backup. Helder Costa's a very good backup option. Obviously Calvin Phillips, decent Euros for the kid. Stuart Dallas, these are pretty decent players for Leeds. Junior Firpo, I think, is a very good signing, definitely an upgrade on Alioski. Melier, a very good keeper. Marcelo Bielsa, I think this Leeds team will still keep up the form from last season. I don't think they can push any higher than they got last year, but again, I think they can have a stable mid-table, play some nice football. They'll be very exciting to watch. I think similar to what they did last season. For Leeds, no better, no worse really, just a solid season for Leeds. In 9th, I've gone for Aston Villa. I've seen loads of people predicting Villa to get to Europe, and while I understand it, I think that's a bit far for Aston Villa. I think, you look at their squad, they've made some incredible signings. Buendia, brilliant signing. Leon Bailey, what a signing that is. How the hell is he going to a club that isn't better than Aston Villa? He's a very good player, Leon Bailey. I have no idea how he's left Leverkusen and he's gone to Aston Villa. He didn't even underperform at Leverkusen. Yes, an incredible coup for them. Danny Ings as well. That's ridiculous. That's an amazing coup for Villa. I think Tuanzebe and Young are also decent signings as well. They've got a very good squad, Villa, and there's no reason why they can't push on. But they've lost Grealish, and, they've made some very good signings, but they've lost Grealish, and he was their captain and their best player, so he's going to be a loss. They've more than replaced him with some amazing signings. But these signings are going to take time to acclimatise, and I think Villa themselves are going to have to acclimatise for life without Jack Grealish. It may seem like on paper that they ultimately can, live without him, and that should be the case, but he was their captain, their best player. They were so reliant on him. So, you've got to provide time for them to settle, and just get to grips with life without Jack Grealish. So I think they might start off the season a bit slow, maybe acclimatising. Then the second half of the season, the signings really kick into gear. I think they could really push on. Ninth, which may not sound all that good, but it's still a pretty good season for a team like Villa. And ultimately they finished 11th last year, so it's still building upon that. But I think they've made some great signings. Had they kept Grealish, I think they easily could have challenged for Europe. They've lost Grealish. I think they'll need to acclimatise for that, but ultimately they've made some very good signings, and it's a very exciting time to be an Aston Villa fan. I once said that I did not think Dean Smith was the man for the job. I thought he'd been sacked halfway through the 1920 season. He's proved me wrong. He seems like a very good manager. He's got a lot of passion for the club, and yeah, it's a very exciting time to be an Aston Villa fan. 9th place. 8th place, Arsenal. Ooh, yeah. Arteta. He's not good enough. I'm sorry, guys. Mikel Arteta is not good enough. I've seen nothing to show that he is going to improve this Arsenal team, that there's any, quality that is going to come into fruition at some point. No, I've seen nothing to suggest that Arsenal are going to kick on. I think it's going to get worse. I think they'll start the season off poorly. Arteta will be gone. God knows who they'll have in the job by the end of the season. But yeah, he's not the man. There's nothing that I saw from last season to think that they'll really improve this year. I think Arteta showed that he's not the man. He's a very weak manager in my opinion. And they've got a pretty weak squad. Aubameyang was terrible last year. Obviously they've got exciting players. Saka, Emil Smith-Rowe, Pepe looks like he's finally showing some of the form that warranted his £72 million move 2 years ago. But yeah, ultimately I think this Arsenal team, they haven't really strengthened. Ben White an awful lot of money for a centre-back. Centre-back wasn't even their main issue. I think they've got some good players, but I just don't think Arteta's the man to get the most out of this squad. And the players they're linked with, Aaron Ramsdale, I think, is spending 30 million on him. Who is in charge of these transfers, honestly? Yeah, honestly, I don't think it's a good season for Arsenal. And, it makes me sad. I've got a lot of friends who are Arsenal fans, but, yeah, ultimately, I really don't think it's going to be a good season. Mikel Arteta, he's not the man in my opinion. The squad, it hasn't really been improved. Too many players are out of form. And I think Saka, Smith-Rowe, good players, but yeah, ultimately I don't think Arteta's lasting the year, and yeah, I think it's a third successive 8th place finish. I even toyed with putting them lower than that, but yeah, 8th place for Arsenal, I think. 7th place, Everton. Now this is an interesting one. Rafa Benitez has come to Everton. Judas. Yeah, Rafa Benitez has come to Everton, and yeah, well, many fans may call him a Judas. I'm a Liverpool fan, if you didn't know. I was a bit annoyed to hear the news at first, I'll be honest, but when you think about it, at the end of the day, it takes away nothing from what Rafa did at Liverpool. He loves the city. Liverpool weren't exactly going to give him another job. He loves the city. He still owns a house in the city. This is the best job he was going to get. He wanted a job in Liverpool. It wasn't going to be at Liverpool FC. So why not go to Everton? I say why not. It still irritates me a bit because Rafa's such a Liverpool legend. Going to Everton, it just doesn't sit right with me. But when you think about it, he needs a job. So, I don't mind it ultimately. It's annoying, but it's not the end of the world. I think ultimately Rafa's a very good manager, and I think he's just about right for Everton. I don't think he quite has the ability to go to a team better than Everton at this stage. But I also think that Everton are just about right for him. It would have been interesting to see what Rafa would do at this kind of club with a bit of money, because he never got the money at Newcastle. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like he's got any money now. He's signing players on free transfers or for fees around £1 million in the case of Demarai Gray. What is going on? Andros Townsend, Asmir Begovic, Demarai Gray, they're not the signings that are going to get you, anything to shout about. About 5, 6, 7 years ago, these would have been the signings that would have screamed at you as brilliant signings. Not anymore, not in this day and age. They've got a decent squad, but a squad that I don't really think is good enough to really push for Europe and top 4. I think Ancelotti really underperformed last year. They've got some good players, Richarlison, Calvert-Lewin. Obviously, James Rodriguez, if he stays, although there's reports that he may not. I don't know, but it's a very hard one to judge Everton. Lots of people think that Rafa won't do very well this season. I think it could go either way. I think he could finish 10th. I also think he could finish 7th. I'm going with 7th though, because Rafa's a good manager, and I think not having those big signings might actually be a good thing. It could be a terrible thing, but it also could be a good thing, because you're not bringing in those flashy players. You're just bringing in players that will play Rafa's way, will be happy to be at Everton, and I think he can really start building something at this club. In 6th, I've gone with Tottenham. Lots of people think Tottenham are going to do really badly. Now, at the end of the day, I understand. Kane could be going. They were so reliant on him last year, he could be going. That would put Tottenham in disarray. Also, they brought in Nuno. He's not the most inspiring managerial appointment, but I really like Nuno. I think he's a wonderful manager. He's just a very likeable character anyway. He seems like a lovely bloke, does Nuno. But ultimately, he was incredible at Wolves, and just because he had a bit of a mixed year last year, that doesn't take away the amazing achievements he achieved in his first 3 years at Wolves. Sensational achievements from Nuno there. And I think he's just got a great demeanour. I think he's a very good coach. And I think ultimately with Kane, or maybe even better without Kane, I think Nuno could really get something out of this Tottenham side. I don't think it'll be amazing, but I think 6th in the league, winning the Europa Conference, I think Tottenham fans would take that. Europa Conference, a joke competition. But if it finally brings some silverware back to Tottenham, I don't think they're going to be complaining. Lots of people are doubting Nuno. I think it's a really solid appointment. And they've made some decent signings. Brian Gill, loads of potential. Christian Romero, I think Galini is another good appointment. As goalkeeper, I think that ultimately he could push out Hugo Lloris, who I haven't been impressed with the last few years. Son, they've been playing him out the middle. It seems to be working. He's a wonderful player. At least they've got Son. I think if they keep Kane, then ultimately, they could finish higher than this. Lose Kane, I don't think it's going to make much difference, honestly. I think if Nuno wants to build something, get out the players who don't want to be there. Just have a Tottenham squad filled with players that want to play for the badge. And, I think Tottenham could surprise some people. It's looking pretty dire right now. No pun intended. Eric Dyer, please don't play him at centre-back. You definitely finish lower if you regularly play Eric Dyer at centre-back. But, it's looking pretty dire at Tottenham. But ultimately, I think they could surprise some people. In 5th position, I toyed with putting Leicester 4th in this. But I think when push comes to shove, I just don't think they're going to do it. And it feels very annoying to have Leicester finish 5th place 3 seasons in a row. And I would say they've lost Fofana. They've got a lot of injuries at fullback. But they've had injuries the last couple of seasons, especially last season. It didn't affect them. They've got some very good depth. I think they've made some good signings. Patson Daka, brilliant signing. Boubakary Samare as well was decent for me, I think, in a FIFA 20 whole City career mode, and he's just had a brilliant season at Lille last year, winning Ligue 1. I think Warren Bertrand is a decent signing as well, and Yannick Vestergaard will definitely bolster that defence in the absence of Wesley Fofana. Get well soon to the kid. But I don't know, there's just something about Leicester that I think that they could not. I just don't know, I just don't think they've got enough. But I also think they could. But I think when push comes to shove, I just don't think Leicester have enough to break into the top 4, especially with the quality of teams we're seeing at the top of this table now. I just think they just don't have enough. But they could break top 4. I think the team that I've gotten 4th could easily have not a great season. But ultimately, I think they'll probably miss out, unfortunately. It annoys me, but I think they'll just miss out. I did toy with putting Leicester 4th. I also toyed with putting them a bit further down, that they could fall off. But I did that last season, and they proved me wrong, so I don't think Leicester will fall off. I just think they'll miss out, though, which pains me to say, but I just think they will miss out. In 4th, then, Manchester United. Now, many people are predicting Man United to win the league, or thereabouts. No, I do not think so. They could challenge, they have to challenge in my opinion, otherwise it's a failure of a season. But I don't think they will, because I don't think they've quite got a good enough squad. They've got a brilliant squad, don't get me wrong, but I just don't see the depth in that squad. You're playing Fred or McTominay in midfield, that's a joke. And I don't think they've got the depth in other areas. Sancho, I think, is a good signing. Varane, less so. People are raving about Varane. Don't get me wrong, he's a good defender. But I think, and you've seen this at Liverpool, the best players are always players who go to the club as a step up. You know, the players that go to the top teams, Manchester United, City, Liverpool, Chelsea, Tottenham, and they see that club as a step up from where they are before. So they really desperately want to win things. You look at Liverpool, all the signings they've made, bar Thiago, in the last few years, they've all seen Liverpool as a step up, and that's where they've succeeded. Liverpool is that big move for them. That's not the case for Varane. He's won everything there is to win in football other than the Premier League. It's less of a step up and more of just a side shuffle. He could be a very good centre-back. You know, that is the centre-back combination of dreams, Varane and Maguire. It's a very good centre-back partnership on paper. But ultimately, Varane, I don't know. He could prove very well. He could also not be all that great because, as I said, Man United is not a step up to him, and that's a bit of a worry. Although Cavani performed in a similar situation last year, so who knows, he could be a very good signing. They're decent signings for Man United. I still think they need another midfielder. I still think they need a bit more depth. I think they will challenge, and I think they desperately need to challenge. Otherwise, it's a failure, and Ollie's just got to go. But ultimately, I think the linchpin of anything is Ollie. He's not good enough. I've said this ever since he was appointed. Ollie is not good enough. He will never win the league with Man United. He can challenge, he can finish top 2, but when push comes to shove, he's just not good enough tactically. He's just not a good enough manager to deliver Man United a league title. He could prove me wrong, but I just don't think he is good enough, and that's why I've put Man United 4th. Many people have put Liverpool 4th. No. Manchester United. In 3rd, Chelsea, another team that many people have been predicting to win the league. I don't think so. I think they'll be part of a title race this year. I'm really hoping for a good title race this year. I think this is the last season where we could, hope for a title race. And if we don't get one this year, I think we just need to accept that a title race isn't coming back. We're never going to get a title race again if we don't get it this year, because the quality of the teams at the top, lots of teams are on par. We need a title race. Chelsea, I think, will be in the mix of that title race. They've just won the Champions League. They've got a very good side. Tuchel's really brought that team together after Frank Lampard left it in disarray. They've signed Lukaku, which is an okay signing. Listen, he's a brilliant player, Lukaku, but it could go one or two ways. He could bang in the goals, or he could be mid. They always say never go back. It was the same for Pogba. I thought don't go back because it doesn't usually work out when a player leaves and then years later returns to their club. Pogba did it, hasn't really worked out all that well. It could be a similar case to Lukaku. He struggled at another big club in Man United, but he was excellent for Everton, and he was excellent at Inter Milan. It could be a brilliant signing. It could be the signing to push Chelsea on to winning a title again. But it also could be a signing that isn't great and it's a waste of money, and Lukaku's decent, but he's not that game changer. I don't know, it's interesting. I don't quite think it's the guaranteed goals that some people are thinking, but it could well prove to be a good signing. It's an okay signing, but I don't think it's guaranteed goals. I think there's a bit more of a little head scratch of whether he will deliver the goals. He could, but I also think there's a more of a chance that he may not than some people are expecting. I think Chelsea are decent, but when you're looking at can they keep up with the levels Liverpool and Man City have been setting these last few years, can they rack up the number of wins and keep them going for the whole season? I just don't think they've got that. I don't think they've got that in this squad. I don't think they can really manage that. So I think they'll challenge. I really hope they challenge, are part of a title race. But ultimately, I think they will finish 3rd, not in the top 2. I did, and ah of putting Chelsea in 2nd, but I think they're just right in 3rd. 2nd place, Manchester City. People are saying, George, you're so biased right now. Why have you put Manchester City in 2nd and not 1st? Yeah, how can I justify this? Listen, the top 3, top 4, but mainly the top 3. I think all of these teams could finish top. And it was very hard for me. I honestly couldn't really see anything splitting these teams. So I had to go with my gut for number 1 and back my team. When all else fails, you've got to back Liverpool. So that leaves Manchester City in 2nd. I think it'll be a good season for City. I think it will be a title race. I think they'll only be a couple points off the top. Grealish, I think, is a very good signing. If they get Harry Kane, that'll be a very good signing, obviously. They may not, and even if they don't, I still think they've got the amount of players to cover. They played with a false 9 last year. I don't think it'll be too much of a miss. They could do significantly worse points-wise, but I don't think it'll be too much of a difference. Although if they get Kane, which they haven't at the time of recording, that will be mental. Lots of people are saying they'll be undefeatable. That could be the case, but I just don't think they will. I think it's too good a City team to be amazing, which sounds ridiculous, but they're too good on paper to just storm the league on paper, because football isn't played on paper. I think Man City will push the number 1 spot, but yeah, I think they'll be well up there. As I say, I'm expecting a title race. I'm hoping for a title race this year. So Man City in second is not me saying they'll be miles off the league. They'll be a couple of points touching distance, but I don't think they'll get number 1. As I said, the top 3 teams were really hard to predict. Any of them could have been number 1. But I couldn't call it, so when all else fails, you've got to back your team. And I backed Liverpool for number 1. Is this an amazingly biased decision? Of course it is. Of course it is, I'm not even going to lie. Me putting Liverpool in first is incredibly biased, but also, I think Liverpool could surprise some people. I've watched lots of predictions, and many people are putting Liverpool in 4th, saying they won't even challenge for the title. What? That's ridiculous, but honestly, that could work in Liverpool's favour. No one's expecting them to do something. They could be the dark horses and go under the radar and get a title. I don't think Liverpool are good enough to storm up 190 odd points, but I don't think that anyone needs to for this league. If we get a title race, I think 80-85 points will be enough. And I think Liverpool could sneak under the radar and do that. I think this team is still very good. People forget, only a couple of seasons ago, Liverpool won their league 99 points. They've kept the bare bones of that squad together. They essentially kept the same squad. But also, people say the front 3. Yes, this is a season that ultimately is going to be pivotal for some players. I think Bobby Firmino, it's pivotal to him to see whether he's good enough anymore. Mane to a lesser extent. I think Oxlade-Chamberlain and Naby Keita. Yeah, I think these players have played good in pre-season. They could perform. And yeah, people talk about the front 3. They've got Diogo Jota, who was in amazing form last season. Just a shame for the injury, otherwise Liverpool really could have kept on pushing towards the title instead of having that terrible run they had last year. Yeah, I think people say, oh, you've lost Wijnaldum. We've got Thiago. And, Thiago didn't really get going last season. Liverpool's first choice midfield of Thiago, Fabinho, Henderson only played once together last year. So yeah, Wijnaldum, he's a good player for Liverpool, but I don't think he's the be-all and end-all. Liverpool have got more than enough in midfield. They've obviously got Thiago, Henderson, Fabinho. They've also got Oxlade-Chamberlain, Keita, Milner, Curtis Jones. They've got Harvey Elliott, a very exciting player. They've got plenty of midfield options. They don't really need a replacement for Wijnaldum, in my opinion, because you've got people like Curtis Jones, so you've got people like Oxlade-Chamberlain there. Harvey Elliott looks very exciting. So yeah, you've got more than enough midfielders there, I think, to cover for Wijnaldum. And yeah, they've got another centre-back. They've brought in Konate. He looks very good. Van Dijk, Gomez, Matip back to full fitness. Alexander-Arnold returning to the peak of his powers. The only position they could struggle with is the forward areas, mainly when the Africa Cup of Nations is on. But they've got Jota, they've got Firmino, and Minamino looks good in pre-season. I'm expecting them to get rid of Shaqiri. If they get rid of both Shaqiri and Origi, then I do expect them to bring in maybe another attacking player, which lots of people are saying they need. Right now they don't. If they get rid of Shaqiri, Origi, or both of them, like it's looking, they may do. I think they'll sign another forward player. I'd love them to sign Mikkel Damsgaard from Sampdoria. Brilliant at the Euros. Apparently he's only going to cost 34 million. I'd love them to sign him, but I don't think they will. But I think Liverpool will sign one more player before the end of the window. But yeah, ultimately I think Liverpool could surprise some people. I think Liverpool could really be dark horses. No one's expecting them to do well. But, Klopp, he's defied expectations before. He's been the underdogs before and won the league, won the Champions League. I think this could be another season. I think it'll be close. I'm not saying I think Liverpool will run away with the league. I think they'll only win it by a couple of points. I'm expecting a title race. But when you can't call the top of the league, you've got to back your team. So I've gone with Liverpool. It's a biased decision, but the more I think about it, the more I think it could actually happen. So no one else is predicting this, but I'm backing Liverpool to finish in first place. So yeah, that's the end of my predictions. A bit of a long video, but I remember my original predictions video last year was also pretty long. I just tend to ramble on about teams. So if you've made it to the end of the video, I hope you did enjoy. What do you think of my predictions? You'll definitely disagree with a lot of them. You may agree with some of them. I've made some tough calls, I've made some pretty obvious ones, and one thing's guaranteed, that this list will look absolutely foolish in a year's time, because it always does. Football is very rarely played on paper, so ultimately, you know, it could go well, it could also go absolutely horrendously. But I put some thought into these predictions, so yeah, you know, I hope they're right. I have a good feeling about them, but I had a good feeling about last year's, and look how that went. So one thing's guaranteed, I'll get a number of these wrong. And yeah, do you think these are good picks? Do you not? What are your predictions? Drop them in the comment section below. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Obviously, if you enjoyed it, hit like and subscribe for more content on the channel, as more football content on the channel. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you're looking forward to the Premier League season, which kicks off tomorrow. Today, if you're watching, but obviously as of when I'm recording, it's tomorrow. But yeah, I'm very excited. Looks like it's shaping up to be a very exciting season. Thank you guys for watching, and of course, a goodbye.